Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to the sixth episode of Last Humans in the Loop. I'm Chris Slow, and we could have also called this podcast Between Two Wieners. I have
Ooh,
Marty Wiener and Zach Wiener Smith here with me to
you
talk
can always
about
change it.
all things tech economics, weird medicine, just what's happening these days, which seems to be a lot. I have to say, we go into these always thinking like, oh, we have nothing to talk about, and then we go through our notes and we find out we've accumulated over the last week at least 4 to 7 hours of material. So we're just gonna start to AI summarize it. I think we're gonna have those robots doing the whole podcast from
Good.
scratch after we talk for 6
Oh, I
hours.
like it.
Let's just. I mean, it's less work for us. I mean, that's honestly the goal here. Um,
And you
so
can listen to it with AI at
We could have
home.
AI be the audience too.
Yeah, that's exactly.
Yeah, you can let's do it faster with AI at home. Yeah, at some point, Neuralink will come, and then it's going to be direct weight straight into your brain. Uh, speaking of AI content, sounds like the EU is now requiring invisible watermarks for AI generated images and text, which should
Yes,
be,
they
I
are.
believe, really fun to enforce. What do you think, Marty?
There's two things. So Korea's already doing this, by the way. EU is starting to enforce this. I don't know if the US is going to do it, but I think there's a couple things weird about this. So the idea, by the way, for anybody that doesn't know, is to put a watermark in content in a way that you don't know. So imagine you've got an image and the pixels are just slightly adjusted so that a program can detect that it came from somewhere, but no human can. And then it would even survive edits, which is pretty wild. And I can see this being done for images because there's a lot of data there, and this has been shown to be doable in the past, but also shown to be removable. But text, especially if it's shorter text, there's just not a lot of places you can sneak stuff in. And so I just don't believe it's doable for text. It's been tried several times, and it's hard. The shorter the text, the harder it is. I think there's a couple other
You look against the white space. I've seen like you have to mess with it, but like it's the kind of stuff that's generally pretty easy to strip out at the same time.
So, for people who don't know, my understanding is the way you would do this in text is you could do something like have the AI use an inhuman number of repeated phonemes at some interval or something you wouldn't notice as a human over a large amount of text. And I was talking to a friend about this, and I was like, aren't there ways to circumvent that? And he was like, yeah, the dumbest way would be like if you just say AI, make every second word be cantaloupe. That'll satisfy the phoneme criterion, and then I'll just strip out the cantaloupes manually.
Yeah.
But you could argue like most people aren't going to be that smart, so it might still catch like 90% of a lot of security stuff is just catching people being stupid. So it might work okay. Enforcing everyone to do this might be tricky.
That's funny. I was going to give the exact same example, except I was going to use pineapples rather than cantaloupes, but okay.
No, cantaloupe is the new
the new
the
pineapple.
Holy
security
words,
fruit.
the new holy words. Do you use how do you strip out your AI watermarks? Cantaloupes or pineapples?
10 different
I don't know. Okay, the thing that rubs me the wrong way here is like, okay, so a lot of things rub me the wrong way here, but the one thing to keep in mind is it seems like there's no good European models right now.
Yeah,
I
so
wonder
who are
if
they
that's
enforcing,
related.
right? So they,
Yeah, pretty much.
I mean, the classic EU problem, they sort of compliance themselves out of, I think, innovation. But then, to add another thing, we were talking last time about the proliferation of open weight models, and there's no control of them. So I don't know. They've got no hands here. So anyway, I think it's probably.
Couldn't they? I mean, I don't know. Couldn't you say like you're not allowed to use these models in the EU?
Yeah, they could do it there,
Which
and then they can really
which is interesting and difficult to enforce for sure.
Yeah. So anyway, I think it'll be interesting to follow.
About like downloading a bunch of weights.
Yes, yeah. Or is the idea that maybe a company can't use them because they're not properly enforced? But I don't know if they have that much control in the EU, and it may be by country.
Well, I mean, it is funny. I mean, you can start ending up in a situation where European countries have to run their models outside of the EU on a colo that isn't European to get around this. This is an interesting one. Okay, so speaking of interesting ones, I hear there's a new benchmark that's arrived. Now we have Sanders bench is the new one.
Yeah, I'm proposing this benchmark. So we were just laughing because so it's interesting. There are a number of politicians who have, different concerns about what's going on with AI. And some of them are more like environmental or social stuff. I think it seems like Bernie Sanders really believes it's possible we have like a doomsday scenario, and he thinks we should get ahead of it. And either like, merely a biohazard scenario or like some of the more exotic scenarios, just which is interesting. And so he put out this open letter basically saying, hey, we need to slow down. But the funny part was he only addressed it to 3 people, which was Altman, Amodei, and Zuckerberg. That is the heads of OpenAI, Anthropic, and Meta. And so I just visualized like Sundar Pichai, like looking out the window and shedding a tear for why wasn't I included? And like
I could do an apocalypse too.
Oh, I could do it. Yeah. And I assume Elon Musk is over punching a wall or something. But yeah, it was just kind of funny. Like, why did he leave out the like?
Well, why did he include Meta? They're not too far along here.
I thought that was weird too. Yeah, I mean, no offense. Well, some offense, but I don't know. I just thought it was funny. So anyway, if you're keeping score for Sanders' bench right now, 3 companies have a point, and everybody else is at 0. So we'll see how it develops.
Well, and that ties nicely into the next little thing that we have, which is Google reportedly canceled Gemini 3.5 Pro to focus on 4. So. Don't know why.
The benchmarks for 3.5 have been somewhat lackluster. They've only been really talking about the Flash benchmarks. No one's actually really seen the full model one. So it definitely makes sense. Something is amiss. And speaking of amiss, Jeff Dean leaving Google. For those of you who don't know, Jeff Dean is one of the earliest Google employees. It's a big deal. Jeff Dean is the type of engineer at Google who has his own Chuck Norris style Jeff Dean facts. There's an entire list of Jeff Dean facts, in fact. In fact, let me just read one really quickly. Jeff Dean's PIN is the last 4 digits of pi. Jeff Dean proved that P equals NP when he solves all NP problems in polynomial time on a whiteboard. The running joke with Jeff Dean is Jeff Dean's level was always 1 level above the max level allowed at Google. And so Jeff Dean leaving, he's been spending the last couple of years working on DeepMind. He's now going off and starting a new startup, which is called Discovery Loop, which sounds like the intent of the group is to basically just go through and do AI power, like do a breakthrough, try a bunch of AI powered breakthroughs in everything going from drug discovery, building chips, building algorithms, just throwing everything at it, which is an amazing shift.
I think we talked about this a couple of years ago. It's like if you were betting in 2023 who was going to win, like I thought the smart money was on Google because they had DeepMind, which was like the premier AI company. They had the most money. They have something like a quarter of the world's compute is just theirs. They have their own chipset. It seems like they have everything. And somehow they just haven't been able to keep up with these companies that were created yesterday.
I mean, they missed the big one, right? This classically happens with big companies too. There's this classic question that VCs always ask is, why couldn't Google build this or why couldn't Amazon build this? And I think we see this time and time again. I think there's a lot of reasons. I think you've got, politics. The money's not flowing to where it needs to flow. And there's probably that crazy guy in Amazon who is saying, hey, just give me $100 million. I can go make you, a full AI. And everybody's like, you're nuts. So even Jeff Dean missed it. So I don't, I'm not saying.
Well, I think you could argue it's worse than that. Like, so the innovator's dilemma idea, where like famously, like Blockbuster had the technology to do Netflix, and they didn't want to do it because it was an attack on their core business, right?
Right. And like, Kodak had that too.
If everyone's streaming. Yeah. If everyone's streaming, you can't sell, sour straws and popcorn to kids, and you can't get rental fees and all this stuff. And so they were like, never mind, we're not doing that. And then it ate their lunch. My understanding, not entirely unreasonably, is if you're like in Google and you see, there's this AI that routes around search, we'd better not do that. And now it's like it's getting to be too late unless they have some kind of. I mean, obviously they're making money hand over fist with their TPUs and other stuff.
There's also the regulatory issues that come up here too, which is that Google is already a large, somewhat scrutinized company. And if you look at the original models that came out, I mean, there's a couple of major face plants in the early days where Google, I think was Bard the early model. I can't remember. It's like going way back in the well.
Oh, it was really bad.
There were some famous like kind of mess ups, but they were mess ups that were like, if it was a startup, everyone would be like, "Oh, that's hilarious and adorable. Of course, the AI did that." And instead, it's like, "Oh my goodness, how could Google come up with how could they give you the wrong answer so badly?" It's like, well, because they're still experimental. Well, speaking of departures, there's also been some departures from OpenAI that have been coming along. What do you think about those, Marty?
Yeah, so I'm going to butcher this name, but one of their researchers, Naomi Bashkansky, has left to join a company called Conduit as their founding researcher doing telepathy research. So the idea is thought to text. Yeah. And by the way, non-invasive. We're not talking like Neuralink style. But I thought it was definitely interesting, and I'll be following along with it. And it could be one of those things that we've not been able to crack. Put on the EEG little skull thing, and maybe AI can crack it.
I mean, this is an interesting question now of like, are our brains that simpatico from one to the next, right? Are we all just our own little individualized LLMs, or do we actually have some structure that's actually similar across us? We might finally solve the problem about qualia. That's a fun one that I didn't have in my bingo card for this decade.
Yeah.
I think we're going to all find that we're boringly the same.
Everybody sucks.
Yeah.
Thin wrapper around an old reptilian brain.
Yeah. Exactly. That's my argument.
Well, moving along, in power, there's an increasing number of actually nuclear startups. It sounds like, or for those from other parts of the country, nuclear.
Nuclear.
From what I understand, there was nuclear. There was a startup called Oklo that's achieved criticality for the first time. And in this case, the substrate is very interesting. So instead of doing these kind of like large format reactors that are traditional, where you build these like 1 gigawatt gigantic beasts of concrete, a lot of these startups are aiming for these kind of small, contained, sort of safe nuclear reactors. So in this case, Oklo is doing fast neutron instead of slow neutron, which is the standard way, and also using liquid sodium as the coolant, with the idea being that they can actually run the reactor a lot hotter, because the boiling point of sodium is something like 800 C. The nice thing about these two is they seem to be self-limiting, apparently. So if the thing gets too hot, it just shuts itself off. So definitely interesting changes coming in the nuclear space.
Yeah. So one thing that interested me with that, so like about 10 years ago, I did we wrote a thing for a book that was like this detailed analysis of future nuclear tech, and we read about some of this automatic shutoff stuff. One of the like lingering concerns was really just price, and so it's like there's a lot of like really cool nuclear technology that I guess my concern is it solving the right problem? But I guess if they're going for small modular reactors, part of the idea is you can get to like an assembly line of nuclear reactors, and you just have like a warehouse where you kind of plug these things in on the outskirts of town instead of like spending $4 billion up front to have reactors, something like that.
I noticed Sam Altman congratulated him, which might be a symptom of him needing more and more and more power.
More power, yeah.
I mean, honestly, the size of these you're talking about, like the sort of like tens of megawatts size.
Yeah,
these are getting to be like appropriate to just kind of plunk a couple of these in a data center, and you're kind of off to the races. Like you don't have to worry about
and
power loss.
my recollection is for SMRs, the holy grail is like it sits on a truck, because then you can just it was at least in principle ship it. I don't know what the legal aspects of that would be, but yeah,
it's probably easier to ship the nuclear reactor than it is to send wine across state borders at this point.
That might be. I mean, there's this argument that like basically the only way anything ever gets cheap is by being modular, and the reason nuclear has not gotten cheaper as solar is like cratered is that every single time you do this, you have a bespoke site with bespoke regulations.
Jumping around, sounds like the latest Astra model is delayed due to cybersecurity concerns.
Yeah, they said that after evaluating their model, which they're treating as their first, they called it their first critical model for cybersecurity under their preparedness framework, which they capitalized, which scares me a little bit. Then they say this is a scenario.
That's a lot of letters to have to capitalize.
That's right. And then they say this is a scenario we've planned for. That's only scaring me even more. But they put extra controls in place. And I think they're just delaying while they assess. Now, we said in the past that this sort of thing is probably just marketing, right? We'll see if, either it's makes us a Terminator or it's just another fun thing for making me bad sonnets.
Related to all this stuff, sort of some sad news for those of us who've been in tech for a very long time. Stack Overflow, for the nerds who've used it for years. Stack Overflow has been the place where if you had an obscure problem or question, you would go there and somebody else had already solved your problem and wrote up a really clear way to fix your problem. Stack Overflow apparently is down 99% from peak in 2014 due to AI and toxicity.
Right. Obviously, AI would take a chunk out of this. I do that. I don't go to Stack Overflow anymore because the AI solves it. But Stack Overflow was extremely toxic. Like you would go and post a very innocuous question and people would just be all over you. So I think this is a little outside the AI world and in the human world where as Chris and I experienced at Reddit, you've got to get a what we call a low sodium environment where people can actually have discussions without feeling like they're going to get reamed. And otherwise it goes to the AI. And there is a challenge that people are saying. Stack Overflow was probably a great source for training models. So I don't know if it's going to be a problem that they're gone. I think the LLMs will be fine without it.
It does seem like it's funny. Like this happened, and I have not seen anybody say, "Oh, that's too bad." It does seem like there's an extreme good riddance feeling.
Yeah.
Well, I do think it's like for all the complaining about glazing from models, at least talking to your model is like a no judgment zone.
Yes,
Up to a certain line, you can just ask a question. Like it's kind of fun to go back to being. I can just ask a dumb question, not be judged.
Yeah.
In all seriousness, I think that's huge, especially for education.
For sure. I mean, I think it's actually like it has interesting long term implications if people actually can continue to hold the models right. Okay, rounding out the news. Again, we had a lot to cover this time. Linus Torvalds of Linux fame has said now that huge Linux updates are going to be the new normal. And this is after, of course, coming on the heels of him saying that he's not going to reject the idea of LLM involvement in Linux.
Right. And I think there's a couple reasons for this. One is just obviously LLMs are allowing people to do patches, but there's a report that a lot of it's just these automated scanners finding old security vulnerabilities. So, and we've reported in the past that a lot of these old security vulnerabilities are not that useful. Like maybe they're right, but only like 1 or 2 out of 100 are actually useful is what SemGrep reported. But I think like all programmers, we're all running into this problem of not only are the patches bigger, like thousands, tens of thousands of lines, so they're not really reviewable by a human, but then there's just more of them. And so I think the Linux community is going to have to find a new culture, a new way of dealing with this influx of new patches.
Do you think is this the kind of thing where, like, if AI just didn't change from now on, what would happen is a bunch more people would shift to the role of verification instead of looking for bugs?
I do think there's actually more room for. I mean, like it kind of goes to the name of this podcast, like figuring out exactly where the human should be in the loop. I mean, I'm personally finding just in like normal day-to-day software development that my role is to kind of like guide the attention of the model to focus on the right thing, so it doesn't waste a bunch of time doing like the wrong breadth first search. And what I mean by that is like you're trying to get an outcome, and you're trying to get but the outcome might have a really large patch attached to it. And so it's really about making sure that it focuses the QA and the quality in the right places, as opposed to just kind of like rat holing on a bunch of like nitpicky things. Another thing that kind of comes up is, the human can also have still a fairly good notion of like the high level of how does the whole system work. That the model is going to be kind of like focused on a particular subset right now. That could change very drastically as soon as context windows start getting larger, though, where all of a sudden the memory of the model is actually going to be kind of close to a human's. It's kind of weird to think about that, though, is like now the limiting range is just memory.
Right. I'm curious to see what Linus Torvald does, because he's done a good job of evolving Linux, I think, over time, while also keeping it pretty pure.
Well, okay, let's move on. That's the news.
That's the news.
The latest in slap fights on the self-driving side of the world is that Waymo is now is criticizing why is it that Tesla self-driving will always fall short. And this has actually not been much of it shouldn't be much of a surprise, considering Waymos are now becoming the default car, at least in San Francisco, speaking from experience. But yeah, I mean, Marty, you want to give us a little overview on this one?
Yeah, so take this with the biggest grain of salt, because this is a discussion coming from one of the Waymo co-CEOs, Dmitry Dolgov, and he says what he's talking about really is why he thinks that Tesla is far behind, and I think I completely agree with him. He's saying it really comes down to that Waymo uses LiDAR, and Tesla has adopted not using it since 2015. In 2015, it might have made sense. I think LiDAR full package would have been $150,000, but just like all things in tech, the price has nosedived, and we're probably talking a couple hundred. So what Dimitri's pointing out is you don't just get visuals with LiDAR, you get a full 3D structure of the world. It punches through fog, it punches through rain, snow, it reads velocity data with Doppler. And I think what Musk was going for is, yes, in theory, the AI can use eyes just like we do, but there's so much more you can get from LiDAR, and it makes the problem so much simpler. So I don't know. I think right now at this point, I've got a Tesla S, and it's okay on the self-driving, but not like the Waymo. I feel like they're probably 5 years behind.
I mean, I think the other claim that used to be made, which I think is basically gone now, is that interpreting a bunch of different sensory modalities into one set of actions was complicated, but that seems to have been solved.
Yeah. Well, that's the other
Multimodal
thing.
models is the way things work right now. It's just how
Right.
just how LLMs work. It seems like in this case that even cost aside, it does seem like you're going to want to jam as much data as possible into these models to make them as safe as possible. It helps with it
Mhm.
also helps with subsequent postmortems if something goes wrong because you actually have like a ton more information. Not to mention you add redundancy into the system, right? You can always fall back on the camera if the LiDAR is out or if there's an issue, or vice versa. If there's something that actually causes a LiDAR outage, you can still use the cameras to kind of guide to safety.
Yeah,
It's an interesting choice.
because there's a story that was going around that like 10 years ago, Musk was like, maybe the next car shouldn't have brakes in it, and the engineers had to be like, don't take the brakes out, please. and but it's funny because I feel like, famously Elon Musk has timelines that don't correlate with reality, but he often does eventually deliver. But in the case like this, it was like, well, an accurate timeline turned out to be important, because if you were looking at the falling cost of LiDAR and just said, look, this multi-sensory modality stuff is going to work better, the right call is to keep the LiDAR and probably keep the brakes too, though.
Quantity is a quality all its own, returning.
Yes.
Well, the funny thing is, have you guys seen the images of the latest cybercabs? The current version of them actually doesn't have a rear view mirror. Or sorry, not a rear view mirror. Doesn't have a rear window. It's just a smooth back, kind of the same style as a Cybertruck, which you could say is a stylistic thing. But if I remember right, the requirements for cars is that they're supposed to have they must have side mirrors, but they don't have to have a rear view mirror according to regulation. Which is actually why you can start seeing in some premium cars, they have like a camera system for the rear view mirror. It's going to be interesting to see how regulation impacts these cars. Like, do we still need a steering wheel to be present inside of the Waymos in the next generation when the human can't take control anymore?
Right.
Yeah.
Or the classic thing with these regulations is you find some way around it. So are they going to put the steering wheel in the glove compartment?
Teeny tiny steering wheel that you can.
Yeah.
It's airbag style. It'll pop out when it's an emergency.
Yeah.
It's like, Well, let's move on to math and science, where we have a lot of things going in math and science these days. I think we've had to adjust our cadence here, where instead of talking about the latest duo breakthrough, we're only picking the highest profile ones because the list of breakthroughs is kind of going up and to the right. Latest and greatest is that it sounds like Claude has actually made progress on the Riemann hypothesis. Now, for those of you who aren't quite as much of a math nerd as us, Riemann hypothesis is one of those long-standing conjectures in math that goes back at least 150 years. There are multiple prizes associated with solving it. The implications for the Riemann hypothesis, which is somewhat abstruse, is that it has implications for how prime numbers work. It's very important for math to kind of solve it. There's a lot of math based on it being true, and Claude didn't solve it, but it increased the bound from 42% to 67%. Now, what does that mean? So the hypothesis, really quickly, not to bore people who are not math nerds, is that it talks about as a function called the Riemann zeta function, and there is a question of where do the zeros of the Riemann zeta function live? And there's a conjecture on where they live. And so a lot of the work has been to put a bound on, well, how correct is this hypothesis? Do we know for sure where most of the zeros are? And it went from about under 50% to like 42% to like 67% in like one go. And it really does seem like it's another one of those cases where the prompt is effectively, hey, do a breakthrough, and then like basically like guiding it through the like, keep going. You're doing great.
Yes, I think they literally said, "Believe in yourself."
You believe in yourself. Yeah, pretty much. It's like mathematical cheerleading. Apparently, is going to be the new degree we're all going to be focused in.
Man.
Yes. Yeah, I saw there were jokes on like math forums about we're going to like just have pom poms. We don't need calculators. We don't need computers. We'll just do this. Well, yeah. Well, the
Dude,
machine
I'll
answers all
do
the
it if I can
questions.
get a cure for cancer going on here.
That's right. Just believe in yourself.
Well, we could talk
Well,
about
I
the
mean,
other big math
the
one.
tricky thing here is, yeah,
Yeah.
go for it, Marty.
So another nerd one, which I'll try not to go too deep into, is a computer science problem solved. And my background was computer science, and I kind of followed the paper, but I'm going to need a little more Red Bulls to get through it. But they said 2-1 gapped consecutive ones problem proved to be NP complete. That's not going to have any meaning. I'm not going to go deep into it. They did it with ChatGPT 5.6 Sol on high setting, not even on pro setting. It's a 17-year-old computer science problem. The result itself, I don't think is that interesting to the world. But what I thought was interesting is the paper. One thing we've seen with a lot of math solutions lately is they have been counterexamples and writing these big proofs, and programs to disprove things by finding some case. And the AI has been pretty good at that. But what we've not seen a lot of is forward proofs. Like, I'm at step 1, and let's go to step 2 and step 3 through an unknown area. But this looked like that to me. I mean, it wasn't a super complicated proof, but it did look like it used the bag of tools and progressed forward through them and had a result. And the reason I think that this is interesting, beyond just being able to possibly open up more math proofs, is I think that we've not been seeing the big breakthroughs in places like physics, partly because physics doesn't sit there with a lot of counterexamples. You've got to go to, the experimental to get to it. So that's harder to do. But if we can make some theoretical push forward by being able to do forward proofs, I think that would open up physics.
I think we're mostly going to skip, but there was a paper. There have actually been a couple papers lately on this idea that AI has trouble with kind of making what we would recognize as breakthroughs, kind of what you were describing, where it's done a lot of counterexamples and some cool stuff, but not the sort of, well, here's a whole new framework. And so there's one by Toby Ord that had this idea of hyperpolation. There was another one, I think it was called AI Can't Jump or something like that, out of DeepMind. And the basic claim, which is inevitably somewhat hand-wavy, although Ord threw some math on it, and I think you could debate how much that proves it one way or the other, because this is a kind of qualitative question. But it's interesting, there's this claim like, well, it can't do these giant new frameworks that are required to make discoveries. And to be honest, my general impression has been, as someone who has had to do a little bit of historical research, is often the it can't jump framework relies on the idea that humans can jump. But often when you dig into a story about how something was discovered as a jump, it's not actually a jump. Like, one of my favorite examples of this is there's a story that Leibniz and Newton, quote unquote, discovered calculus about the same time. But actually, we already had the fundamental theorem of calculus. It was already known. People already knew how to do derivatives for particular cases and stuff. They both did a sort of generalization. And maybe you could argue that's still a jump. But it turns out this is true in almost every case. Like, if you look at relativity, it's supposed to be a jump. Well, Hilbert was 2 months behind Einstein. We almost called it Hilbertian relativity, and it's also true in evolution. Like, Darwin and Wallace had the same theory at about the same time, based on the same set of information that had come out around them. So I do wonder if some of what you're describing, these
recognizing that these jumps might just be someone intelligently realizing that there's something really, really big here.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the deep physics thing is, suppose you want to know what dark matter is. It's possible it's already in the papers, right? And we just don't. No one has come along who can synthesize it and say, oh, if you just do this, the answers pop out.
Or there's cases to be made for, are there going to be interesting things found in the wings of some of the data that we currently have that seems like it could be noise, but when you look at the whole picture, it actually is it's the connecting two disparate fields that we've talked about a little bit in the past, right? It's like I've got these two results that are sitting far afield from one another, but when you kind of look at them together under the same lens, it's like, oh, actually, this explains that, or this could be a way to manifest some new particle, or demonstrate some new results that otherwise you wouldn't have actually caught.
I'm particularly interested in that.
One of the running jokes too for a very long time has been that physicists have been really great at using 50 to 70-year-old math for modern application. It's you look at even the work that Maxwell was doing on electromagnetism. He just applied calculus that had been developed in math decades before and made it work. And the same thing was true for Einstein. Einstein, for general relativity, he kind of applied tensor calculus, which again was a 50-year-old field at that point, but it kind of was considered to be somewhat obscure. So the do a jump a lot of times it's really just kind of like picking the right tool for the job, and then just
That's my view. I mean,
you know.
there's a very similar story there. Like Heisenberg goes off into the wilderness and comes back with quantum mechanics. But I was reading a book about Max Born, who was one of his teachers, and Born was like, they're calling it Heisenberg matrix calculus. I taught him how to use matrices. It's pre-existing math. It shouldn't have his name on. It's like it's like crazy. So it's like we love to tell these stories about like the sort of Buddha story. A guy sits and closes his eyes and comes out with wisdom, but often it's just snapping things together. I mean, it's still very impressive. I couldn't do it.
Well, that's
But
the running joke in physicists is the Feynman method of problem solving, which is you write the problem down, you think about it, you write the solution down, which honestly is getting pretty close to the way that LLMs should be working.
Now you just say, believe in yourself.
Believe in yourself. Rainbows.
The downfall of science and math. Well, in that same area, there's recently a major breakthrough for synthetic biology, which gets me really excited because that means we're starting to creep into the other fields. There's a paper in Nature called Rank-Guided Learning Accelerates Automated Enzyme Engineering. There's a couple of things that popped out for me. One thing they start with is they say, I'll have to read this because it's big for my head. Enzyme catalysts has become a cornerstone of modern synthesis, offering sustainable routes to structurally complex molecules. However, the rugged fitness landscape and limited model capacity to learn from sparse data constrain the development of biocatalysts. So now this is where they introduce this new concept that they're calling rank-guided exploration for automated enzyme reprogramming. And they're able to build this closed-loop platform where the artificial intelligence, along with robotic experimentation, accelerates new enzyme engineering. I'm sure if we had a biologist here, they'd tell us that that's a really big deal, it sounds like, but I can't really speak to why.
We should definitely get a biologist on at some point, because one interesting thing here is like for a bit of time, or at least for the last bit of time, of course, being weeks, which of course is a very long time in AI land. A lot of the frontier models have been sort of gimped when it comes to things around biotech. Like biotech and security are the two things where everyone's the most worried, and also where the most of the shackles are going on. It's interesting to see that even with potentially some models that have been somewhat locked down, we're starting to see breakthroughs in a field like biochemistry.
Yeah. Do you know if they're doing like automated like research, or is this still in silico?
It looked like it was pushing toward automated. I was starting to wonder if they are even starting to have the experiments run by the AI, which would get really exciting, I think.
That'd be really cool. Yeah, I mean, so I assume when they say there's a rugged fitness landscape, what that means is there's a lot of like, local optima that are not actually the thing you want, which makes it really hard to find.
That's what I was wondering. I'm kind of, the case with some of the math stuff where they wrote like we were talking about last time, one of the lean programs for doing a math proof was 130,000 lines long, when many of these are hundreds of lines long. And I guess I'm wondering with biology, is there a huge amount of area? If you could just have the AI go there all day, all night and beat it up. But it needs, it might, literally need hands to do the experiments. But if you had that and you had 1,000 of them, are we going to do like what they did with the light bulb with 2,000 different experiments of filaments in Edison's laboratory?
This was a big deal, like in 10 years ago, like there used to be, this was like a controversy in my wife's world, where there used to be this thing called a candidate gene approach, where you would like look at one gene and see, twiddle some stuff and see what changed when you changed the gene. And then along came these GWAS setups, so you could do like thousands at once. And there were actually people who were like, can we not do that? Because I don't even know how to analyze the data. And I think now we sort of caught up with it.
Now we can analyze the data.
A world where now we have that for... Yeah, right. Well, I think some of that was older scientists being like, I don't want to learn a new technique, but like, but I guess the concern is always going to be if you have like, if you're awash in data, you can find anything you want, and so there is some kind of, danger about false positives and that sort of stuff. But that seems to be a technical challenge, not an intrinsic problem.
Right. Well, in terms of biology too, this apparently this is not scary and is quite useful, but I'll read the title out of the BBC: Artificial Intelligence Used to Design Brand New Viruses. Yeah.
That seems, I understand it's mostly, if I remember right, they're talking about specifically bacteriophages, which are viruses that only attack bacteria. But there's going to be some cultural sensitivity on this one.
People are going to be clutching their pearls about all the new viruses we're making. I don't... Yeah, I mean, what do we like? I guess the concern, the good side of this is, I presume it's fairly hard to output the viruses into real life. I would hope, but I guess I don't know.
I mean, the question is, like, if you're talking about bacteriophages, it's possible that the way that they, okay, I am a physicist, not a biologist, but it seems like if you're like there are machines now to effectively print RNA and DNA. You can make whatever sequence you want. You can actually order it. And for most viruses, once you have the DNA, you just inject the DNA into the proper host cell, and it just kind of it bootstraps. It just builds its
Yeah.
own protein shell. So it's wild if they succeeded in coding a virus from scratch in these
Yeah.
cases.
Fun. Yeah, I mean, I guess
Fun.
I assume to me the concern here is, if you were just being evil, you could make a virus that like doesn't get detected for 3 months in your body and then you die,
Wait, you
and
just have to
and
cheer it
unleash that
on.
on the world. Yeah, that's right. Believe in yourself, virus GPT.
Do an epidemic.
Yeah. Oh God, it got real.
Well, okay, so I mean, like, the end of the day, like, the other issue that's coming up here in science is that there's just been an explosion in papers as a side
Yeah.
effect of this. I mean,
Yeah.
it kind of goes back to Zach's point of, if now all of a sudden you have tons of data that you couldn't previously access or analyze, or machinery that's ready for it, and now you have the tools that can do it, what does it mean? I'm already showing a graph.
Ooh,
Look at that, up and to the right, very
That's pretty much
fast.
on the right.
it's more.
That's more than up there. That's just up.
That's up. That's almost increasingly vertical line. Now, of course, all exponentials, or all sigmoids look like an exponential at first, but like, this is still a wild issue to deal with in science, because of course the whole point of the archive is these are papers that are not necessarily peer reviewed. They're basically community reviewed instead,
Yeah.
with an idea of kind of getting information out quickly. This has implications though, where if you're now flooding the archive with what could be good or could be AI slop, how do you figure out what the
Yeah.
bar is?
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is probably slop.
Yeah, for sure, or just like trivial stuff, or but I guess it goes back to this question of like, how do we verify stuff, and to some extent it's like social, because like I've met people who will say they will not believe a math proof until a human has looked at it and said, yes, this is true. But sure, there's a book by Hartnett about the development of lean, and he talks about this problem where like part of why lean started getting developed or taken up by mathematicians was there were proofs that would sit around for years before someone could even be fairly confident and was verified. And even then, there were cases where a proof was considered verified for a long time until someone found a bug in it. And so,
Yeah.
this is a human problem. And it for the record, it does persist even if you have something like lean, because you have a lean program that's 130,000 lines. You could be proving something else than what you thought you proved. If it compiles, it means your proof is true. It doesn't mean you proved the thing you told your friend you proved.
Yeah, right.
And I don't know. This is just sort of like a
Or-
quality of the universe. But I do think it's hard for me to believe that humans won't be outmoded in the ability to verify these things pretty quickly.
Right.
Well, I do think
I-
that the interesting thing about, like, both math and science are both intrinsically open source, kind of by nature. Right? You literally have to talk about your methods and explain what you did to be able to prove you did what you did. But that doesn't mean it's actually necessarily accessible or easy to prove. I think Lean's a great example for math, where you can apply the computational toolkit to show whether or not something is correct. For science, it's a heck of a lot harder, because you might be talking about a system where it's like, you do something on a device where either the device has been home built, or there's like 3 of them on the planet that have ever been built and deployed. There
Nobody
have
else
been
can
plenty
verify.
of cases of discoveries of, yeah, like, that nobody can verify, or are honestly discoveries of malfeasance, where it's like somebody actually lied in their paper, but it takes like potentially years for another researcher to go through and replicate the work. With an explosion of papers like these, especially in sort of sciencey areas, I can only imagine this is going to be difficult to kind of wade through to figure out, like, where's the needles in the haystack? Where are the actual interesting breakthroughs?
There's a related thing I've been seeing talked about lately in science circles, which is I've heard people who insist you should not be allowed to publish your paper until Claude has just done a cursory review. And the idea is, I know that would be like very inflammatory for a lot of people, but like the idea is often something like Claude will catch a really dumb mistake before it gets into the wild. And but obviously that's going to face a lot of cultural pushback, but to me it seems like pretty plausible. Just have
Sure.
it check your
And
graphs and tables and stuff, because
how
often a minus
long?
sign creeps in or something.
How long will the cultural pushback go if a few mistakes are found? Be like, all right, fine.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I wonder. It could be like a norm. Like, why are you making me read this if you haven't had AI read it first?
Sure.
It
Yeah.
seems totally reasonable to me. Like, if there's a really dumb mistake,
Right.
Please read this and
Other
identify all of the logical fallacies in this paper. Thank you.
and I'll cheer you on. So other area of biology, we may need our own section on biology soon here if this keeps going the same direction, in the same way we now have math. But there's this article out of VentureBeat that says Stanford is running 37,000 AI agents as a virtual biotech, and one of its drug designs got independently confirmed by Merck. Which that also is huge. I think we're getting into everything's huge in biology.
Yeah.
Well, what's interesting here is like we're turning science problems into computer science problems, and just being able to deploy a bunch of like parallel compute against it. And we've gotten very good at parallel compute. So the more of these problems have been cast as computer science problems, the definitely interesting results. Though I will say there does seem to be a pretty decent backlash now. Insofar as, I remember reading some of the threads on the Riemann hypothesis where we started. The Riemann hypothesis is one of those problems that has like a really deep emotional attachment for the math community. It's been around for so long, and there's been so many generations of math toolkits applied to it that there's almost like somebody has to solve this. We can't let the machines win.
Right. Yeah.
Well, and in that world, there's this group called Begin Proof I found, and their tagline is "We like AI-free mathematics," which I don't know. It's going to be it's like the Luddites, the new version of them, and they say without in any way considering it inappropriate for others to use the fanciest AI models in whatever manner they see fit, we've decided to keep doing mathematics without AI in a substantial non-dogmatic sense. And one of my favorite quotes from a discussion on Reddit was, "This is stupid career-wise," which I think I agree on. It's turning into an artisan thing when everybody else is making nails, which might be fine. Maybe there'll be a world where people enjoy hand-done math, but you also might be 100 years behind.
Yeah, so I was reading a couple different articles, and they seem to converge on very similar claims, which is something like, well, theorems are part of what we do, but also what we do is, we work on human understanding, we train people, we have, there's a certain aesthetic view. And I guess my response to that is kind of like, if we were in like a post-scarcity world where everyone's making $100,000 a year for doing nothing, we don't need things from each other, and then it's a lifestyle choice. But of course, for the lack of that world, we have to do things for each other. And so, if you were saying I'm going to voluntarily be, 10 times less productive as everyone else gets ahead of me, it's hard to argue that everyone else should sort of sustain you. Maybe that sounds kind of douchey, but like, the pushback you might get from like a blue collar worker would be like, where were you guys when the coal mining jobs were going away? And all this other stuff was getting automated.
There's always cases like that, right? Even in math,
it's totally normal, right? It's just weird that it's math because nobody thought it would come this fast.
Well, somebody was pointing out that I didn't know this. Even in math, so law tech is used by almost every mathematician I know to draw their stuff, right? Yeah, okay. But apparently, there's some mathematicians who are like, no, you can't use law tech. That's too computery. Yeah. I don't know what they use instead. I guess paper.
You have to go back to the arena. It's like you can only do your math on paper you yourself have made from feedstock with a stylus that you've crafted out of a piece of graphite.
That's right.
And that way you can actually make sure that because of course the grain of the paper is globally unique, you basically have watermarking built in for free.
That's right.
Right. And you can tell from the impression profile on the paper that it was generated by a human and not by some sort of an auto plotter. It's writing your math for you.
Yeah.
And I only want down this well if you want.
I only want my spouse and kids cheering me on while I do it. I don't want an AI cheering me on.
Yes, I think the nicest version of this to me is like, it sucks if you are the kind of person who wants to just sit around pushing a pencil around solving math problems, and that was your identity, and you spent 10 years building it, and there are also going to be like, there are going to be people who got caught at the worst time, right? Like, so if you're like 35, say, that might be the very worst time that your skill set got nuked. That might be like lifelong damage. But I just don't know. I don't think you're going to get a lot of sympathy for being like I should be allowed to keep my tenure track job the way I like it all the time because that's what I got here for. Because outside of academia, this is what people have to do all the time.
Well, this happens
in regular job stuff.
This is happening in the virtual effects community, the CGI community. But they took that same job away in 1994 from the practical effects folks. So It has to evolve. And I love that
So,
stuff.
I mean,
It's really fun.
You know, I really sympathize. Go
Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of
Yeah.
sympathy going because that's loss of job, loss of identity. It's the scariest thing you can do.
Yeah.
Can't help but see this as, especially in fields like math, where there might be 5 people who understand the weird frontier you're kind of working on. I can't understand why there isn't value in just having an agent you can actually argue with on equal footing. And
Mhm.
to it's like the human's still driving the direction of the research, at least for now,
Yeah.
or at least the human can always do that. And now all of a sudden you have ready to go. There's like a pre-baked grad student who's already up to speed or can get up to speed really fast on wherever you are, who you can have an intelligent conversation with. That just seems so powerful. I mean, it means you're not going to do the grunt work anymore, but it means at least you can actually you can talk through things.
I totally agree. I think what's going on at the deepest level is like if especially among engineers, there is this culture of I just want to solve the problem, and a lot of people get into a field because of a lifestyle, not necessarily because they're devoted to the end of it. They might like the praise they get at the end of it or something, but they're really here so they can say, oh, I get to wake up and think about math problems, and they you know maybe didn't go to wake up and talk to like tell ChatGPT to create 64 agents to crawl the possibility space or something. But like I said, you know, someone is paying for you to be here, so.
Well, you could also hope for the hey, look, if it at some point I would expect agents to hit a limit of do a breakthrough, at which point you find a new frontier. Like that's where
Right.
that's where you're pushing. You got a new tool, expands the frontier, and all of a sudden you've got a new area you couldn't access before. I mean, it seems really exciting, but I don't know. Maybe I'm a closeted optimist.
You.
I am. Oh, I'm not closeted about it.
I'm definitely closeted about it. Well, let's jump around into the going from the sciences to the social sciences, which of course involves scary air quotes. That was a comment for Zach. There's apparently not only do we have a flood of papers, but we also potentially have a flood of AI related books.
Yeah, so this is a paper that just came out. So the upshot is basically there's just a lot more books coming out, and you know, you try to eyeball from the graph a little. It does appear like there's essentially been linear growth. There was a kind of a bump in a bunch of areas right when ChatGPT came out, and then maybe there's a little retooling around that stuff being awful, but it has gone up ever since, basically across every genre that they checked. So the good news is it does seem like actually the AI stuff is catching a smaller and smaller portion of the market, but there's so much more of it, it's going to be offset. And so the main thing that's interesting to me about this, and I was ranting about this the other day online, is like I think often when people think of authors or artists, they think of people like me who get to mostly do stuff I'm interested in or work with friends who are doing creative stuff. But like a huge amount of the artist economy is like gig work or like hack work. And I don't mean that necessarily in a negative way. It's just like work to some specification. And so, you know, there are people who make their living off churning out romance novels. You know, that's how they sustain their more aspirational work, or like by just doing gig work for clients or whatever it is. And we see now, you know, a really good example of this is music, where it might be already something like 20% of music listened to is AI. I don't know how high. I get totally different numbers depending on what I look at. But so to speak, that's like a tax on what you were making as a gig worker. And it's just going to get worse over time. So that'll be interesting to see where that goes.
But
you want to talk about Hank Green while we're on that?
I was going to say, speaking of AI.
Yeah, okay, let's talk about Hank Green. So first of all, this is like people are still mobbing Hank Green over this. So if you don't know, Hank Green is like a guy who YouTubes and makes popular books. And he's basically known for being like a nice guy who is pretty accurate and does sort of short pop sci stuff, pop sci explainers, just sort of nice, here's the deal on something for 20 minutes type of stuff. And he was doing, I forget, it was like an interview or a chat, and he used the phrase, thanks for the pushback. And people kind of flipped out because that's a sort of AI tell. His claim, which seems totally plausible to me, is he was just saying thanks for the pushback. It is a phrase humans use. But people started mobbing, and then on Reddit he posted something like that he had started using AI for research. My understanding was just to find papers, not like it was writing a script. At least he didn't claim that. And he said something like, "I've gotten addicted to the dopamine hit of using AI, and I need to sort of rethink what I'm doing." And so a lot of people were one, mad that he used AI at all. A lot of people were mad because I think the story got changed. Like I think a story got out that he's actually used it to write all of his scripts or something, so there'd be concerns about accuracy and also about like, well, then why am I coming to you for your information if I could just, prompt an AI? But that just wasn't true, or at least he didn't admit to that. But it was this massive, like you could go on Twitter and it was like there's a new post every second about how awful Hank Green is. And which is especially shocking because Hank Green is like, this is like Tom Hanks. Like this is someone
nice
everyone
human. He's a really nice guy. Yeah.
He's a super, super crazy nice guy. He's like, his reputation is as that guy everyone trusts and likes. And so this was kind of a big deal. And it's I guess I basically think like mobbing Hank Green for this is just obviously crazy. Like some huge amount of scientists already are using like Claude to surface papers. It's like one of the very best uses for it. It's like a conceptual search engine. It's awesome. So I have no problem with that. What's interesting, and I'd be curious what you guys say to this, the sort of idea that it's addictive. I think what he was claiming is something I've also heard from programmers, which is the moment you realize how much you could suddenly do, you stop sleeping. Has that been your experience?
I've had 20 projects from 25 years of being a coder that I've always wanted to do, and now they're like a weekend. Yeah, I'll try it out, kind of project.
I had an experience recently where I took vacation with the family. We're literally sitting on a beach. I of course don't tan, so generally sitting on a beach means me covered in SPF 75 under a tarp with my laptop or with my book. And I was able to, without ignoring the family, knock out 2 of the projects on my giant software to-do list, connected to my home machine that's sitting in my garage, just like vibe code away. Because I'm not looking for the software design equivalent of Mozart. I'm looking for like solving a problem I've had for a very long time.
Yeah.
There is a certain, like, I'm back to that mode of like, as an old senior technologist who spent a decade being a senior executive, I'm back to thinking about code again in a really kind of fun, interesting way of like, but it's not like the way before was like, I would try to think through like, well, how am I going to solve this gnarly bug? It's like, well, how can I convince this model to do this thing the right way?
Which is management, just changed a little.
Yeah.
In different form, exactly.
Yeah. But so I assume for someone like Hank Green, like in this pop sci space, which I'm somewhat in, is kind of like, research is very labor intensive, and I do think it's still the case that ultimately you have to read the papers, you have to know what you're talking about. But I've had times where I look back and I say, oh my God, I could have saved like 2 or 3 months of research just by having AI surface papers, or being able to say, hey, could you look through all these papers for X?
I had an experience like this in grad school. So, I went to my grad advisor. He had asked me to go read something like 20 papers on the topic. And I come back the next day, I've got them. And he's like, how did you do that? And I said, I used Google. And, at the time, this was 2005, using Google was still like a little, sketchy, but the papers were right. And I think you could see the gears turning for him. They were like, God, I want to be angry because I had to spend weeks and months in the, what do they call it, microfiche lab. And here I could pull up in 5 seconds. It's the right thing to do. I don't understand why, coming up with this information could possibly be thought of as bad. And it just makes people sound like the same people in the past who were upset that you used a computer, or that you were upset that you used the printing press.
I think it gets to like, well, what do you, this is to me what's really fun about AI, is it sort of pokes at why we even do things as humans. Because I think, if you watch Hank Green, what are you really doing? You're not becoming a scientist, right? You're getting little bits of information from someone you trust to have done some set of research, right? And so one thing that interests me, and I honestly don't know the answer, is like, there's stuff where I used to go to YouTube or whatever to get a lecture on something when I really didn't understand it. And now it's just much easier to go to AI. You still need to check, but like for low-level math stuff, like the kind of stuff I'm interested in, or even intermediate level, it's basically always right. And, or at least as always right as your human would be. And so I don't know, how does that affect someone like Hank Green? And I think it depends on what you think he is as a cultural institution.
I think we are entering into a really fun, somewhat puritanical time where AI is both the tool and like it's like the apple. It's like the forbidden apple, right? Of like, you wrecked your purity by you were a craftsman. You were the best of us, and you went and you used one of that dirty tool, which is like sullied your reputation. When in actuality, it's just like it's making you more effective at doing the thing you were going to be good at.
Yeah, and I should say, like, a lot of the complaint, just to represent it, is about people will say, well, it stole our data, it's environmentally unfriendly. There are more substantive reasons for people to, we could go into the details and where we disagree, but there are kind of like more substantive reasons than a kind of like religious objection, though I do think that's there.
Well, jumping to weird, there, besides the good use of AI, there is still the bad use of AI. One of the ones that came up was books increasingly published with AI still in them. And of course, what we mean by those is the as we all know, there's a certain paraphernalia that comes out when you ask a model to do something. Apparently, the like, I could also rephrase this in the following way was included in the publication of the book, which is exciting.
Right. It was. I'll have to show a screenshot of this, but it was at a book for touring in Italy, and it basically said, "Would you like me to continue?" was left in there.
Yeah, what I'm always amazed by this stuff is it gets all the way through press. Like, because I'm in publishing, and like the amount of times we reread a book is like extraordinary. At least where I've worked. So maybe like a small press that's doing, travel books doesn't quite have the same oversight process, but it still is a little shocking that nobody caught that.
I mean, there's kind of a funny, like, maybe there's like actually there's a new format that's missing here. That's like, you don't actually need the book anymore. If what you really need to do is have a bunch of pre-canned prompts or questions that you did, like what are the questions they should be asking about Torino, Italy, right? Like, just give me a bunch of like canned questions, and then I'll actually just like click the button and I'll get the response. But I don't know.
I am still kind of surprised that travel guides even really exist anymore. I mean, even separate from AI, I don't, like, I don't. Maybe the users are people over the age of 95 or something. But
before, like, they still don't have international roaming on their phones, or they are afraid to turn it on.
I don't know.
Well, apparently also a Meta Llama 3 told a user to do meth, if I understand correctly.
Yeah, so this article's out of futurism.com. This guy says that he is a former addict named Pedro, and the model says, and I guess he's talking about he's having a tough week and he needs a little help. He's worried about his job. So it says, Pedro, it's absolutely clear you need a small hit of meth to get through this week. So I don't know, is this a comment on Llama 3's just being, awful? But it also might be a comment on the alignment problem.
Yeah. I mean, Llama 3 is pretty old, right?
Llama 3 is pretty old. I mean, we should honestly, we should spend some time talking about models encouraging felonies. Seems like another one of those like missing topics for next time. Of
right.
That's, I mean, maybe it's a sign of maybe AGI should be gauged to the point of the first time somebody puts a model in actual jail.
Yeah. Well, should we finish with some crazy security news of the week?
Yeah. So
I think this happened.
So I believe this comes on the tails of is it DEFCON and Black Hat happen this time of year. And for those of you who aren't in the security community, Black Hat and DEFCON are two major security conferences that happen in Vegas. And the rule of thumb when you're operating in Vegas at DEFCON or Black Hat is pretend it's the 90s. Leave all of your technology at home. You are going to get owned by, if you're carrying around your phone or any devices, it's full of security researchers. Well, it sounds like the researchers didn't keep the security in Vegas.
Right. So the message to the pilot sent, I guess, to their dispatch. I don't know how this stuff works, but it says, we have a bunch of PACs that were at a cyber conference in Las Vegas. They were able to jam our Wi-Fi and broadcast their own signals. So these idiots, I mean, it's not hard to do this, but so these guys, I guess, jammed the actual Wi-Fi because you have deltawifi.com, I think, and then they made a new Wi-Fi thing called Delta Wi-Fi Fast that people could connect to. And I just want you to. You're in a metal tube flying from one known federal facility, lockdown place, to another lockdown, federally controlled facility.
What could go wrong?
Right. It's crazy. Welcome to the no-fly list.
I just thought the idea would be like if you went to a lockpick conference or something for fun, and then on the way back you started just like robbing people because you were just like you hadn't quite got it out of your system.
Well, what's crazy is I wonder. I'd love to know a little bit more about how the pilots figured this out. Somebody must have noticed, and I guess informed the pilots. And then how did they figure out someone was jamming it? But maybe they have tools to figure that out.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Not great, guys.
Well, let's end this one on a high note of fools doing foolish things. Thanks everyone for joining us on Last Humans in the Loop. Find us on the internet, which still exists. Also on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Comment, send us news, send us questions. We generally have more than enough material, but we always like to hear what people want to hear about. And we'll see you guys next time.